Good. We all set? Good evening and welcome to the Kenmore-Tonawanda Union Free School District Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. District Clerk, please note that all trustees are present. I'd like a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing litigation as it relates to the Child Victims Act.
So moved.
So moved by Andrew. Second by Leslie. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor say so signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. We'll now enter executive session and we'll return at 6:30 to continue our regular session.
Are we going to go
Gentlemen.
Oh, we can just stay here. That's Welcome to the Kenmore-Tonawanda Union Free.
We're good? Okay.
Good evening. Welcome to the Kenmore-Tonawanda Union Free School District Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. We are now back in public session. District Clerk, please note that all trustees are present. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To start, we did have a request this evening that when somebody's about to speak, if you would say your name. I guess with the camera angles, it's difficult to tell who's speaking if you're watching this remotely. So if you could say your name prior to what you have to say. And to start, as always, I'd like to start by reading our vision and mission statement and our values, and so that we're aware of that and help us to guide us in our decision making this evening. Our board and district vision is to create a community that creates dynamic learners who possess social awareness, confidence, and a belief in their power to succeed. Our mission statement, the Kenton school community will provide our students with the supports, tools, and diverse opportunities needed to meet the challenges of an ever-changing world. And our values are mutual respect, independence, trust, teamwork, integrity, passion for excellence, and responsibility. Okay, on to item 4A, the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Andrew. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jen. Any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor, so signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. 4B is our approval of the minutes for the August 4th, 2020 regular Board of Education meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? So moved by Tom. Second?
Second.
Second by Leslie. Is there any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor, so signify with aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 4C is the approval of the minutes for the August 20th, 2020 special Board of Education meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Leslie. Second?
Second.
Second by Andrew. Any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor, so signify with aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, item 5A, public comments. Do we have? Okay, no public comments tonight. So we'll move on to 6A, our committee reports. I think we said at our retreat that we're going to just go through each committee, and if there was a report, you report it. The trustee could report at that time. If not, we'll move on. Anything from the Audit Finance Committee? Nothing. How about the Board of Education Policy Subcommittee? Okay, the ASB Budget and Finance Committee? Nothing yet. The ECASB Delegate Assembly, I know that meeting is this Thursday night. I'll be attending that, so we haven't had one yet there either. The ECASB Legislative Team, I don't believe is met. No. Family Support Center. The SAVE Committee.
Nope.
No. Staff Development Policy Board has not met yet this year, I know. The Technology Committee and the Wellness Committee. Okay. So
Hey, Matt, while we're on the topic of committees, I did think, it struck me, the one thing that we did talk about doing, and we don't have standing meetings for the policy subcommittee, but Leslie, if you're amenable to this, I'll work on getting something set up for us to start talking about working on the board handbook. I'll just send a query out to Jill first and see if and how she wanted to be involved, because I know we kind of discussed that at our last board retreat, I believe.
We did talk about that, yeah. No, that would be-
So I'll get the wheels rolling on that, and then hopefully at our next board meeting, we'll have an update on that committee.
Great.
Okay.
And Matt, since the last board meeting, you and I attended, I think at least 4 of the reopening task
Mhm.
force committee meetings. And for the last 3, I think, parents were selected as representatives for each building. I thought that was, I'm sure, an essential move.
I agree.
Parents asked some great questions.
Mhm.
I remember
I agree. Thank you. Okay, board comments. I know I have a couple, but if anybody else has any, would like to go ahead.
You want me to go first?
Oh, that's fine.
I mean, you can go first. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, that's fine.
Well, actually, back on August 18th, Trustee Battaglia and I had the pleasure of attending the summer school graduation. Mr. Matt Raines was the summer school principal, and his staff, they did just an excellent job with the ceremony. I thought it was actually held right here in this room. And like our 2 high school graduations, was very personal, which impressed me back in June with the high school graduations. It was the same here. Families came in here as a family. They did a great job of social distancing, so you come in as a family in 10-minute blocks, and as the students entered, the family was already in here. Pomp and Circumstance played. We heard it, 18 times that night, I think, because I think we had about 18 graduates. And Mr. Johnson from Kenmore West and Mr. Hayden from Kenmore East, along with Superintendent Samato, bestowed the diploma on the graduates. And you could just see they're there, not only the graduates, but the families, their faces beaming, and it was a neat ceremony. During times like this, we're always looking for positives, and I think certainly a positive this year was the four graduation ceremonies. Kenmore East, Kenmore West in June, Big Picture in June, and now the summer school graduation were certainly events that the class of 2020 and their families will never forget. Excuse me. Okay, at our recent board retreat, and the meeting that followed, the board meeting that followed, we agreed to use SuperVail as our platform for completing the superintendent's evaluation and our Board of Education self-evaluation. We're all aware how busy things have been this summer, I think, and it's kind of pushed our original timeline back a little bit. But I wanted to just note publicly that the first step in the superintendent's annual evaluation is to set goals and competencies, and the superintendent and myself agreed on the date of October 1st as having that input into SuperVail. We also need to do a Board of Education self-evaluation, and I thought if it's okay with the rest of the board that we shoot for October 1st for having that done also. And if that's okay, I'll once I put that date into the program, it will generate an email as a reminder, unless there's anybody that wants to.
Is this the evaluation, or is this a preliminary?
It's the preliminary one, and then
Okay.
and then we take the results of that, I think, like January-ish, and check the progress of that. I think last year was actually done, if I remember the date in SuperVail, I think it was actually in September, sometime in September. And then I have one last comment, and I'd just like to congratulate Trustee Morrow. Ms. Morrow was featured in this month's Board Connection, which is a publication that's put out by the Erie County Association of School Boards. It was a neat article about Jen's experiences, her family life, and her record of service to public education. So congratulations on being featured there.
So Leslie Battaglia. I just have a comment on graduation, summer graduation. I'll add to that. It was really good. It was great to see 18 kids excited about coming in to get a diploma and to have pictures taken, and there was a special place set up for them to have their pictures taken. It felt like a graduation, so that was really nice. My next comment is a comment sort of appreciation to both Mr. Brett Banker and Jim Badgley for putting together the sports awards presentations. I think they came out about the middle of August. The Westies, and I think they're called the Easties, but I could be wrong about that, were really well put together. I was really impressed. As you know, I was a parent of a daughter who attended one of those, and you know, I can imagine the parents of the kids who didn't get to see those, you know, live and in person, but this was kind of a neat way to do that. So I appreciate that a lot. You know, and I can, as a member of the Booster Club, the Hall of Fame Booster Club, I can also say that in some cases, you know, those students receive scholarships from funds raised by the Booster Club, and I think it's just amazing what the Booster Club can do. So, but I just want to comment to Brett and Jim, thank you so much for putting those together.
It's grown so much, and I think just about every athletic team has a booster club that has sponsored a scholarship. So there were a lot of awards given out there on those 2 days. It's awesome.
Yeah, I watched both of them. They were great. Fun to watch.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment about first day of school today. My daughter is a sophomore at Kenmore-Tonawanda, and a lot of teenage angst and grumpiness throughout the weekend leading up to school. I think was kind of, you know, the summer's ending, but a little clear beyond what school is going to be like this year. I'm working from home, so I was home with her today, and she was so lucky. It was really nice to see, you know, out of the few minutes in between classes, she'd come out and play with the dog, and I had lots of big smiles, and so it was, I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. So kudos to the staff at Kenmore in particular, but the rest of the administrators who put the plan together and got school up and running this year. For my family, it was a really great start to the year. I know that there were probably other families who didn't have such a great experience, whether they had technology issues, but we experienced a really good day today. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 4. I'm sorry. The NISBA Convention proposed bylaws and amendments and resolutions. I'm going to turn this over to Vice President Gianni for discussion.
Sure, thanks, Matt. So Matt wanted me to just start by giving an overview of what the New York State School Board's resolutions are and how that process works. It's a series of basically positions that the members of the School Boards Association vote on a yearly basis at the annual business meeting, which happens at the end of the annual conference. And they represent, in a lot of cases, sort of legislative priorities or a sense of direction for the school boards across New York State. The actual mechanics of the process in the business meeting is each school board has a delegate to the meeting, and it's a relatively orderly and very strictly follows the Robert's Rules of Order. For those of you who have been to Ecasv events in the past and met Jay Rona, who's the chief counsel for the New York State School Boards Association. He has facilitated that in the past when I attended, and does a very good job of making sure everything follows the right process. But essentially, at the end of the day, they'll walk through each of the resolutions. The resolutions will be read, and then there's an opportunity for individuals to get up and speak on behalf of and against the resolutions that they so see fit. Some of these will fly right by. Everyone's going to look at them and either say yes or no. Some of them will be more hotly contested and will take some time, both with the comments that come up and then the actual vote, and you have paddles for voting and whatnot. I think tonight we should, number one, decide on who is going to be representing the district. I know Matt and I are on the delegate assembly. I was not planning on attending the conference when it was going to be in person. Now that it's virtual, I may attend, but I still haven't figured out if it works for me from a timing perspective because I hadn't previously been planning on it. President Chimera, I know you were planning on attending, and if you are so interested, I think it would be great for you to represent us as our delegate if the rest of the board sees fit.
I'd be fine with that, yep.
Okay. So then generally what we have done in the last few years is we're not going to exhaustively go through all of the resolutions because there's 20-something resolutions and we don't need to pick through every single one of them. However, we do want to give board members an opportunity to bring up resolutions that they have questions or concerns about. At the end of the day, the notion is that Matt is representing our Board of Education, our school district at the meeting, and will represent us in terms of the way that he votes. If we read through the resolutions in here, you'll see that they're reviewed by a resolutions committee of the State School Boards Association, and some of them are recommended for passage and some of them are recommended to be rejected. So generally what we've done in the past is if there is a resolution that you have a concern about, either because it's put forward for passage and you think that maybe we should vote against it, or vice versa, if the resolutions committee has put it forward and said we should reject this, but we as a school district think that we should support it. Those are generally the kinds of discussions that we would have. If we agree with them, unless there's a specific issue that you want to just sort of raise and bring light to the fact that it's something that's being promoted or not at the state level, then we could talk about those as well. So I know there were a couple I wanted to talk about, and I did not. I know President Chimera had sent out an email asking for us to sort of submit resolutions that we'd be interested in discussing, and I did miss that deadline, but there are just a couple that I'd like to discuss. But I don't know if the rest of the board would, any of the other board members have any resolutions that you'd like to bring up?
Have any questions about them? And there's a couple that I think are pretty positive I'm okay with. So, like I don't have ones that I feel truly negative about, but, if you touch upon a couple of them, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Sure. I'll tell you what, I'll start with the ones that I want to talk about, and I don't know that any of them are ones where I feel that we should vary necessarily from the committee's recommendations, but I did want to bring them up for discussion. So the first ones are resolutions 2 and 3. So I'll just read the resolutions. Number 2 is resolved that the New York State School Boards Association shall support legislation that makes it easier for districts to recover attorney's fees in legal cases related to special education where the district is the prevailing party. And number 3 is resolved that New York State School Boards Association shall support legislation that would shift the burden of proof in special education due process complaints away from the district and back to the party seeking relief. So the reason that I want to bring these up, and these are resolutions that are supported by the resolution committee, I always struggle when we start talking about the costs associated with special education hearings. Because I think it's really critical that these kids get the services that they need, and I have no doubt that there are due process hearings that happen that needed to happen, and that there needed to be an exception made, or whatever the case may be. I do know that there are, and this is kind of what's called out in these two resolutions, there are people, whether they're parents of children who are just, I don't know, misguided, or legal firms or lawyers who are interested in benefiting from the fact that the way that the system works currently. And that's really what these resolutions are intended to curtail. And I think anything that we can do to avoid abuse of a system is something that we should do. However, as most resolutions are, these ones are pretty broad and don't prescribe anything in particular. And my biggest fear is always just that, what is the ratio of abuse of the system to kids who truly needed help that's acceptable for us? You know, it's a rhetorical question, I don't have an answer, but if, you know, is it like if 50% of them are legitimate, then we're okay with eating the cost of the 50% that aren't? Or, because the last thing that I want to do is, especially for that first one, is have a parent with a child with a legitimate issue be afraid to come forward and push for that hearing because they're afraid of the risk associated with losing that hearing if they're not in a financial position to reimburse the district for legal fees, say. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be the way that this works. They could pass legislation that says, cool, New York State will pay the legal fees if you lose, so the district doesn't pay them, or the person doesn't pay them, or some other sort of remedy for that issue. But this doesn't really address that, and I'm always wary of putting a broad policy in place or putting a broad position statement in place that has the potential to damage our students' abilities to learn because they don't have the appropriate constructs in place. So those are the first two I wanted to bring up. I don't feel like I have a strong sense that I think that we should vote against them, but I struggle with them. So I don't know if any of the other, my fellow board members have any thoughts on that. Honestly, I'd be interested in the administration's perspective as well, because you deal with these kinds of things firsthand, and if you have any thoughts there, I would certainly be interested.
From an administrative perspective, I can say that obviously we do everything that we believe is the right, in the right interest of the student. However, we fully acknowledge that the law is interpretable, and that's where these things come out. You are correct in that there are some law firms that certainly drive things in a direction that is not necessary, and we are very accommodating and willing to work with a family, but it goes down this road because of the representation that they have. I think the first resolution simply indicates that it would allow the district the ability to access or recover the legal fees in the event that we win the case or that we prevail. So that makes sense. We'd be able to recover that a little bit faster. But you know, everything is sort of bundled up in our insurance brokerage policy stuff. So I don't know that that resolution is going to really make a significant impact. So I wouldn't have any reservations with doing that, but I don't see that either one of those resolutions would really significantly hinder or improve our processes.
So are you saying, because I don't really know the details, are you saying that if we were to win or if we were to lose these hearings, our insurance actually covers
It depends on
some
the case.
or all of the?
It depends on the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if this were passed, maybe our insurance costs would go down because they wouldn't be paying as much of those, but what you're saying is right now, we don't feel as much of a burden because of the fact that insurance helps buffer a portion of this, or am I misunderstanding?
No, not necessarily. Just the transfer of funds isn't clear. It isn't super clean. I don't know if Robin can weigh in on that, but it's special ed money comes and goes very quickly, if you can imagine. So I don't know. I mean, it isn't. Some cases are very, very, very costly. So the ability to recover that, in my experience, it's happened in a very fair timeline. I don't know that we've had any held up, per se.
Are you saying right now we do have the ability to recover costs when we're?
If we prevail, if we win the case, and that's part of our resolution, that we would recover those costs. And in most cases, when we are negotiating the terms of a settlement, we would build that in.
Oh, so this isn't saying that we would be able to recover them. This is just saying it should be easier
Faster.
to. Oh. Okay, I had a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was helpful. Well, I mean, if that's the case, then I don't see an issue there. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting the position in place that made it harder for students to get the services they need. But that doesn't sound like this is, has any effect on that.
When we settle the terms of the agreement, we indicate the timeliness of when a student would receive services, and that's irrespective of the payment process. So if we say in terms of the agreement that the student will, usually it's effective immediately and the payment is retroactive if there's a payment involved, but the student services are absolutely at the forefront of any case on either side, and those are typically enacted immediately.
Great, okay. Well, if that's the case, then I have no concerns. I don't know if other districts are just dealing with maybe the different law firm culture or legal culture in different parts of the state. I also wanted to bring up, just because I had concerns, potential reservations about those, I did want to point out that resolutions 15 and 16 on a similar topic around similarly around special education. So number 15 just reads, resolved that the New York State School Boards Association seek to support legislation that would provide for training and certification for professional parent advocates to attend Committee of Special Education meetings and hearings. To me, that seems like, it seems like a no-brainer. I know that special education policy and even just sort of the philosophy of special education is something that even a parent with a child with special needs, especially if they're young and they don't have a lot of experience, having somebody to advocate for them or to work with them, to me seems like a good idea. And then number 16, resolved that New York State School Boards Association support legislation that promotes the reduction in costs associated with an impartial hearing, independent and evaluation requests, attorney fees, and associated with due process claims. This one, I'm not even really sure exactly what to say about, because legislation that promotes the reduction in costs. I don't even know what that would be. That seems just, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on what that might look like, or if this really is like a fool's errand.
One of the challenges with the independent evaluation process is that if the parent decided to challenge a portion of the evaluation that the district conducted, they have the right to an independent educational evaluation, and they get to choose their provider. And in doing that, you have providers who prefer to do IEEs at the grand expense of the school district, where they would charge differently if it was a private evaluation. So it can be very, very costly to the district. And our policy is that if they request this and they have to they have to specifically challenge a portion of the evaluation, then we just pay for it.
Okay.
So it can be very costly.
All right.
So can I, on number 15,
Yeah.
you pointed out something that's kind of interesting to me, and a question. This is the parent advocate that sits on the committee, correct? So
Yes.
do we already do some sort of training for them anyways?
So that is a standing practice, and the state actually provides the parent training so that the district isn't, because they are supposed to be an impartial person.
Right.
So we don't provide that training. It's provided, there's different parent advocacy centers located around the state that provide that training, so that's not new. The challenge we have, it used to be that the parents had to participate in this training, and the challenge we have is finding parent advocates and then having that training. So the regulations have actually softened a little bit, but that is not new, that we would prefer that our parent representatives receive some degree of training.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was my question. I would assume that they would have already, I can't imagine being the advocate who has to sit through multiple meetings not really knowing
Right.
enough information.
I was trying to think of why these sounded familiar, and now I'm remembering that we had a conversation around a set of similar resolutions last year. These ones are proposed by Wilson Central School District, not far from us. And my understanding is that there is, if you read the rationale for the first one, number 15, the second paragraph reads, however, some parent advocates serving in this role take an entirely different approach to advocacy. Instead of working with the school district in a professional and collaborative manner, they use a confrontational adversarial approach. They do not appear to have the student's best interest in mind. These resolutions are built around a specific person or set of people that a particular, that I think are rightfully are producing a challenging situation. That doesn't seem like why you create positions for this. I'm saying that they didn't, the problem isn't that they have training, it's that they're doing something different afterwards.
So the title or the role of the parent advocate was changed, I believe it was a year ago, maybe 2. And it was better defined that it was really just a advocate for the parent and not a legal advocate. And they have juggled a very fine line between those two roles and have served in a very legal capacity when that is not their responsibility on the committee. So that's probably in response to that redefinition of the parent advocate responsibility.
Okay. All right, well, those are the ones that I wanted to bring up for discussion. Again, I would sort of leave it to you to sort of listen to the discussion in the meeting itself, because I think that's one of the things that I learned, and I remember, I think it was the year before I attended the meeting, former board member Chris Pashler represented the district and came back and sort of spoke about this and mentioned that, you know, no matter how much we look at this ahead of time, sometimes it's not until you get to the business meeting and you hear the discussion and the people speaking for or against these that you really sort of understand the sort of finer points of why these positions are being proposed. So again, you know, we're charging you to represent our district and trust your judgment, but those were just a few that I wanted to make note of. I don't know if anything else has come up. And also, this is not speak now or forever hold your peace. It's September. I think we have one more board meeting.
One more board meeting before we have to.
And actually, there are amendments and statements of support due on 9/18. So it will get a new updated copy of this before our next board meeting that will have amendments and statements of support. And so that may be interesting to review. And I'd say we should probably just put that on the docket again, because there will be additional information in there that will potentially better inform the decisions that we make. So
I did have one question. I was hoping to get some feedback from the cabinet. It's about resolution number 19. It's kind of a lengthy one, but let me read it here. It says, resolved that the New York State Board Association produce and widely recommend the adoption of a board policy or language to be added to the existing policy related to child abuse, stating that the adopting district will encourage and facilitate all school personnel, including those that are mandated reporters and those that are not, to participate once every 3 years in a course or workshop that presents information related to the signs of child abuse and the responsibilities for reporting it. I certainly am in favor of anything that that helps us to recognize child abuse. My question, I guess, though, is seeing that it's basically everybody employed in the district, it sounds like, and being a 3-year renewal, is that something that's doable or a nightmare for logistically? I just was wondering about maybe Jeffy, Mr. Richards, do you any feeling on that? Is it so it would be every employee in the district basically would have to have this course every 3 years. Is that something that, you know, we have?
Yeah, we could set up a course through our online training every year or every other year or third year. We could idea to start looking at mandated trainings that way. It's nice for the state to have that particular training. We could find an option embedded in mandated training anyway. Sure.
And the tracking of who has it and all that.
Yep. You get a report and you get every company and you want to finish it. It's during the process of updating that software, it's pretty comprehensive.
Okay, good.
We just started that last year.
Uh-huh.
That automated process of doing online training with NICE because there are, I'm sure it's free. And yeah, it's all nice to online or university. It's pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. So, pretty happy with it overall.
Great. That's the only question I really had. Anybody else? Any other resolutions for now?
Was that proposed by NYSER?
Regarding this resolution, I was just wondering, does NISBA ever report on the success of any of the resolutions that are passed? For example, last year I authored one essentially asking the state ed department crack down on waivers granted charter schools for teacher certification, and it went through, was passed at convention, but I never heard whether the Board of Regents or the State Department acted on it. And, you know, same with other resolutions. Do we get any kind of feedback or report?
I'm not aware of, do you know, Andrew?
I know at some point I read something that had an update. I almost want to say, do these end up in like one of the editions of On Board, or is there's some publication, like a formal publication that goes out that has these in them? And I remember reading through, or maybe it was on their website, where they actually have a list, because you can go to the website right now and it has all the positions. So there's 20-something resolutions now, but there's already a whole bunch of positions that are already out there. They all sunset after a certain period of time and then can be put up for renewal again. So there are a whole bunch of them out there. I'm thinking it's just on the website and you can actually look at them, and there's someplace I've seen an actual update on that. So if it's not, if you look at the NISBA website and you look those up and it's not there, I would just contact somebody at NISBA, because I know that they have put updates in there, like from like their advocacy team, because they're actively working on stuff, and it'd be dumb if they weren't publicizing that. So it's definitely out there somewhere.
So there is a place.
Let me ask, on Thursday evening, I'm attending that meeting at ECASB. I'll ask that question. I'm sure somebody there will have the answer. Anything else on the NISBA resolutions? Okay, our next item on the agenda is our student representatives report. Each year, seniors from our high school have the opportunity to apply to be a student representative on our Board of Education. And just a couple weeks ago, August 28th, Mr. Hayden from Kenmore East, Mr. Johnson from Kenmore West, Superintendent Samato, and myself had the pleasure of interviewing 8 outstanding candidates for these positions. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce our 2 successful candidates. First, from Kenmore East, we have Lauren Reinhardt. Lauren, I want to just say a little bit about you, Lauren, because your resumes are impressive. Lauren's a 3-sport athlete at Kenmore East. She plays soccer and runs indoor and outdoor track. She's a member of the National Honor Society. Lauren was a student rep on the superintendent search and worked on the Kenton District Capital Project promotional video. She's also a Link Club leader, a member of the Wilderness Club, and a member of the youth group at the Williamsville United Methodist Church. So, welcome, Lauren. Glad to have you on board. And next, from Kenmore West, we have Kendall Brock. Kendall's also a 3-sport athlete who participates in cross country, indoor and outdoor track. She's a member of the National Honor Society. Lauren was also a member of the superintendent search. It's not why Mr. Samato picked these 2, by the way. But she's been a student council member for 4 years. She's a student council treasurer and has been a class officer for 4 years. Lauren's a Link Club leader and volunteered for the Hoover Middle Musical. She's also a member of the Code of Conduct Committee, Chorus, and participates in Model UN. So welcome, Lauren. Kendall, I'm sorry. Based on these resumes, there's probably people in this room thinking you should be in this seat. So once again, welcome. We look forward to getting to know you better and working with you. Lauren and Kendall haven't had an orientation yet, so I told them they wouldn't have to report at this meeting, but by October, we hope to have them in for an orientation and getting them more involved in the meeting. But congratulations again and welcome. Okay, item 7A, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Samato for his report.
Wonderful. Thank you, President Shamara. And Lauren and Kendall, you have impeccable taste, so I'm just... Congratulations, girls. You did a great job, a fantastic job in the interview process. So you should be very proud of yourselves, and your family should be very proud of you and your school community. So congratulations and welcome. Colleagues, tonight we're going to talk about, I want to include 3 things in my update. The first one is quite substantial, and I want to give you a summary for this first one, so we'll start there. And the objective is that I really want to deepen your understanding as to, you've heard a lot about the work going on. Dr. Riekstad talked about task force and all the great work that's been going on by our parents, our administrators, our teachers, our support staff, to get ready for today. Today was, it's not the end, it's just the beginning of the school year, but I wanted you to understand a little bit more specifically about last week and some of the procedures that happened throughout the district last week. I want you to understand this week, what it looks like for kids, and then talk a little bit more about the future, what we've learned, the outlook that we have for the future through this phase-in model. We'll talk about that a little bit deeper. So let's start there for tonight. So I'm going to ask Ms. Kelly White, her team with Mr. Muscarella, Ms. Cross. They're going to start us off with last week and this week, and then I'll take over from there. So welcome, colleagues, for all the great work and hard work you've been doing with the teams.
So we just have a couple of slides here to summarize some of the exciting work that was happening last week in our schools. The first piece I'm going to start with, by the way, I'm Lisa Cross, Director of Secondary Education, so it's good to see everyone. So last week we had our first ever virtual Kenton Remote Teaching and Learning Summit, where all of our teachers, so we had approximately a little over 700 KK members, were logging on and receiving 6 hours of professional development during our opening days. And there were 4 key focus strands. The first one was on learning management systems, so our Google Classroom in Canvas. The second strand was student engagement tools. So that was a theme that we had for the spring, is equipping our teachers with better tools to engage students in a creative way. So examples are Pear Deck and Flipgrid and Cami, so you can ask the kids in the coming weeks if they know what those are. Also, the third strand was social and emotional learning. What are restorative practices and how do we support those disengaged students? And then the fourth strand was teaching and learning remotely. So how do you establish protocols and norms and focus on building relationships? There is a link there to the actual virtual live sign-up. It was pretty cool to see it. We had over 25 of our own KTA staff members providing instruction. And that included our instructional support specialists. So they co-taught together and provided those. The teachers actually participated from their classrooms, but they were virtual. And then also our principals provided meetings within the buildings that focused on safety protocols and opening procedures as well. So here's a nice picture of some of our teachers now. And then the next, I think Mike's going to give an update on our.
So I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what the remote learning that started today in Kenton looks like. I want to spend just a few minutes on the platforms we are using. In the spring, we were really using multiple platforms. So we have narrowed down our platforms to Google Classroom and Canvas K-12. So parents, there's a streamlined approach to, and our students, that they're using really one platform. We're using the Google Suite. We're using Google Meet exclusively throughout Kenton K-12. And also a new feature this year, we're using Remind K-12. So Remind is really for the messaging between our staff and parents, and Google Classroom and Canvas is really the learning platform. So both do different things. We do have some self-contained teachers at the elementary using Dojo. There's just some features that they wanted in place of Remind. So that is just selected self-contained classrooms. But that is a much greater improvement from where we've been in the spring to where we are now, trying to streamline and take some of the stress off. How do I get on? A lot of the questions, and teachers have now gone through the training, realize that the Google Meet link is right inside of Google Classroom. So they log in. At the elementary, we have badges that they could scan. Those went home in the material bags, and they go and click one button, and that's the Google Meet. The schedule we talked a lot about over the last month, 4 days synchronous, meaning taking place in real time. The secondary level, it follows the school bell schedule. At the elementary, it's really designed around the morning for that synchronous instruction. In the afternoons with special areas and RTI providers, asynchronously in the afternoon. Modified periods at the secondary level. I do want to just stress that the elementary is starting slow. We're building up to this schedule. We're not putting students online for an extended amount of time. Today, we just were able to log in. Our teachers read stories. They got to get to know you activities. That will grow from today. Tomorrow will be better than today. Next week will be better than this week. And then we will grow into a schedule. As far as synchronous instruction, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, real-time interaction between our staff and our students, being able to be responsive to students' needs and questions. A lot of the training last week was a deep dive into Google using all the features, and the feedback is immediate. The asynchronous part, again, happening on Wednesdays and special areas in the afternoons of the elementary. Learner-centered, students can work at their own pace. This is really an option. Many students in one household. There are some opportunities for students to access that instruction in the evening or after hours. So we've been working with our staff to be able to do that. Being able to collect data, try to give feedback. Again, all these platforms that we talked about really are conducive to both the synchronous and the asynchronous model.
And so we also wanted to just paint a picture of what do the first days of school look like in our homes? What are our students experiencing? What are our priorities as a district? And this outlines, I'm not going to go through every detail here, but we have a heavy focus on relationship building, right? So the teachers and the students getting to know each other in the remote environment. I was at Big Picture this morning, and Mr. Kruger, the principal there, was very excited. He had 75 kids in their opening meeting, and they did some team building things in a creative way. So it was fun to hear that great energy in our schools. So are they working on class greetings, norms for their meetings, reviewing expectations? What are protocols for raising your hand? What are protocols for if the camera might be on in the beginning to take attendance, and it might go off after that, and then might go back on when you do a small group interaction? So the teachers are working on establishing those based on the content that they plan on covering. Additionally, students can offer some suggestions, right, for the teachers to kind of build that community in their classroom. On all their sites, we've offered various tutorials too that teachers could put on for students to reference if they need a refresher on how to get on Google Meet or do a specific app that the teacher had taught. And then on the side here, kind of talk about what are our students doing at home, right? They made some fun pictures that Patrick Pinelli put on social media today of that learning space. So encouraging students to establish that learning space, making sure they have their device ready, knowing their schedule. I talked to a couple parents today on the phone, some help calls, just here's your schedule, here's how to find it, and then also picking up materials. So our elementary students are picking up, I think, all week this week. Devices and materials. Our secondary students are picking up materials next week. The devices are ongoing. So that's also part of what the first couple of weeks look like.
I do want to point out there's some really beautiful presentations about accessing Google Classroom and Canvas on the district website that were designed for parents to be able to access. We've also shared them with our teachers, and our teachers are placing them in their messages going out. Lisa and I are working with our tech department on answering as many questions and login information as we can. The information was shared, but we are following up with those parents, and really it's a great site to be able to learn a little bit more of how to access. The slides are well done and right on the district website.
Any questions?
So folks, if you could help me by giving the entire team not just Kelly, and there was one more slide. Wasn't there another slide at the end of that?
Yes.
If we could bring up just that last slide one more time, because that's going to be the premise of what I'm going to talk about really quick. So Kelly, Lisa, Mike, administrators, teachers, support staff, our parents, our families. Look at it. The reality is none of this is easy, right? None of it's going to be perfectly clean. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's going to get a little bit sloppy, right? And we're all getting our hands dirty with it. But the premise is September 8th today. We've all talked about this, where we are October 8th, where we are November 8th. The goal is, of course, it sounds very simplistic, but we get better. The learning is in the doing. So we have all the beautiful plans written out. Our teachers and our kids are going to experience more and more success the more that they're doing it. The structure, Mike alluded to it, Kelly also alluded to it, that the structure in the spring, we were in survival mode, okay? Sometimes I still feel like we're in survival mode, but the difference is we're in a better planned out survival mode, okay? And we're trying to do and make sure that the delivery is better and better. We've been focusing on this slide over and over again in the past, I don't know, 3 weeks now, Patrick, right? Team, it's been about 3 weeks since we really launched this slide. It seems very simplistic, but it is extremely detailed. What I want to demystify for everybody is that people are really getting caught up on these dates. These dates are target dates, okay? Once we pass this first target date, if we see that things are going better, folks, we have the ability to move faster. I'm not going to lie to you about that. I'm not going to say that that's not an objective. We want kids back in school. So I want the board to be very clear on that. I want parents to be very clear on that. Hopefully, this is going to be our worst case scenario. What this gave us was time to not only, we've talked about PPE, we've talked about the delivery of instruction, we've talked about any challenges, any things that we're looking about in that delivery of instruction, but we've had a very great partnership with all parties involved, our teachers, our administrators, and we're finding the ways. The delivery of instruction we'll continue to work on. We're going to continue to work on what it looks like in a classroom with kids in front of you while some kids are still at home, and everybody's open to that. But I just want to be very clear that even though this is very simplistic, there are a lot of things going on in these phases to prepare for the next group or the next phase. We're doing, right now, I know Mike is working with our pre-K, our K, and our 1 to make sure that not only are they ready, not only are the schools ready, but some things are happening during that phase 1 for some introductions. Some things are happening in that phase 1 to be prepared to be back in school. It's not just that the teachers are preparing, we're preparing families, we're preparing our kids that when they actually come back, they can hit the ground running. It's not like we're starting over at September 8th all over again. Does that make sense? So the big question has come from parents, and I thought it was worth talking about tonight, that January 4th does seem like it's a very long way away. Trust me, nothing is as important as getting kids back in school, especially when you look at that January 4th, and we're talking about, not that I'm forgetting about other grades, but we're talking about our seniors, right? We want to get our seniors back earlier rather than later. So girls, I know that affects you directly, okay? So please share with people. We'll see how things go. We'll take it slow, make sure that things are safe. Remember our two priorities. Safety has got to come first. As long as we see that things are safe, as long as we can absolutely promote and keep our children, our staff, and in turn our families safe. Best instructional model. We are in the best instructional model that we can deliver right now. It's not the best instructional model that can exist. In person, with teachers, we have some great teachers in Kenton. The teachers doing their thing, we'll say, in person, that's the best instructional model. But right now, we're in the best instructional model that we could deliver, the most consistent instructional model that we could deliver, the most precise instructional model that we could deliver, and people will get better with that instructional model. It will continue to improve. So, with talking about this, and with looking at this, I'm gonna move on to our next objective with leaving this up. And I'm only gonna talk about this for a couple minutes tonight, but a lot of work will be done over the next week regarding athletics. And I want to bring you up to speed with what's going on, where things are, and what to expect, okay? We have not made a decision on athletics yet. Really, not many people, I don't know, maybe other districts, I don't want to speak for other districts, but the conversations that I'm having, everybody is looking at everything that's coming out, all the guidance that's coming out, and looking at what we can do and what we can't do. I just want to be very clear on this, okay? The objectives will exist for athletics the same way that they existed for instruction. The first priority is safety. Folks, I don't mean to disappoint anybody. I'm telling you very clearly from the beginning. If it's safe, then we can do it. If we can't guarantee that safety, then we're looking at other options to present. I'm not saying that to let everybody down easy. You know, that was the thing. Well, you're telling us because we're going virtual when we're first going virtual. That's not what I'm saying. I would tell you tonight, if athletics were no, I would tell you no. We can't do athletics. It's just not there. But we have to look at what we can do to maintain safety. We have to look at the data that's out there. We also have to look at then, second objective, before it was best instructional model, best model that we can provide for extracurricular and athletics, okay? We will look at that very intensely this week. Mr. Banker, I asked Mr. Banker to join us tonight. I work with Brett very closely at looking at any of the suggestions that we have out there, the guidance that we have out there, and it's very delineated. I'm meeting with area superintendents tomorrow, only to discuss athletics and to put our best thinking around it, okay? And I will learn from them just as hopefully as they will learn from me with my experience with athletics. But I cannot make any guarantees. I'm not going to tell you that this is on the table or off the table, but I do hope to have that and have some decisions made, hopefully by the weekend. It might dip into early next week, but that's where we're going. Now, why I'm bringing that up with you tonight is I think that it's fair that we have some discussion about it, okay? And we talk about some of the things that may be concerning, some things that you're hearing from the community about concerns, or things that are positives that we should consider, because we do have to put everything on the table. I don't want us to be closed-minded to it. And I do want us to hear about it. It's not going to be the only thing that guides our decision, but hearing multiple perspectives are always healthy, okay? And I think that's a good premise. So before we move on, if you don't mind, Mr. Shamera, our president, I would like to just get a little bit of discussion right now during the update. And is that okay that I'm doing that during the district update part of it? Still learning. So it's just making sure that we could hear if there's any questions that I might be able to answer for you now regarding it. So I'll open the floor to board members at this time. Doctor.
Superintendent Sonata, thanks for bringing this up now. I know you touched on it as well in Friday's Weekly Connect. You just mentioned that instruction should mirror athletics. And one thing that I'm sure not people want to notice this is the likely discrepancy if some fall sports move ahead between the guidelines set forth by the state ed department for phys ed classes, wherein there's supposed to be 12 feet separation in all directions for aerobic activity in phys ed classes and no contact. And saying student athletes would be not adhering to that in some high-risk sports, especially football and athletics. So I just wondered, what the district is thinking in terms of that question. And I had a couple of others. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, let's take that one first because it's a very valid question, and it's that's one of the main considerations, Dr. Riegstad, in full transparency, is that when I'm saying aligned, it has to be aligned to our thinking of what made us originally go virtual to start. We want to make sure that we would be prepared to be able to implement something. It also has to align with our phase-in model, okay? And the items that you brought up, not that I can answer them tonight, but they will play a major factor, at least in my mind, as the leader that you brought here to make sure that we're going in these directions that are the best for kids right now. That's weighing heavily on my mind. So I don't think that there's going to be a one-size-fits-all for athletics. I don't think that just because guidance came out, it's kind of like when guidance came out from the state. The guidance from about reopening school. The guidance from the state said, okay, you're clear to reopen, but by the way, here are these, so many pages of guidelines that you have to follow and that you better make sure that you follow because we're living in a pandemic. So that's what I mean by that. You are absolutely right. Right now in phys ed, it's 12 feet apart. For instrumental music, we have all sorts of regulations that we have to follow. So when we're considering athletics, we're not just considering an individual sport. We have to consider the impact and what we're saying across the board universally. And for some people, that's going to be a difficult pill to swallow, right? Just like it was when we went to virtual instruction. But we have to follow that first priority. That will be at the forefront of the decision. But I will not decide safety only based on my feelings as a person that truly enjoys athletics and extracurriculars. I've asked Brett to continue getting some data and for us to be able to look at data. I'll take some of these conversations that we have tomorrow because I'm not afraid to admit that I am still a newer superintendent, and I want to hear some feedback from colleagues when it comes to what we have to consider and make sure that I'm considering everything when we're looking at it. But high contact is any contact. Anything that violates a 6-foot threshold has to be something that we truly take into deep consideration. It was when we designed our program and when we looked at programming in schools right now. So I have our, our NISFA guidance that they released on Friday that talks about the return to athletics and talks about the guidance for each athletic. There are low risk, moderate, right, Brett? Low risk, and then moderate, low to moderate, moderate to high. Am I saying it correctly? Without going and looking in that and document. That I think you guys have seen it. It's been on the news and was published last Friday to delineate it a little bit more. I'm not quite sure how those sports came to be categorized as that. That's going to be one of my questions tomorrow, if anybody can give me more information on that. I'm a little bit confused by that. But we have to look at everything from practice to competition to spectator, right? So even something that we might deem is safe to practice and maybe even something to compete, we may say that no, but we're not going to say we're going to deem it safe for spectators. So that's what I mean. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all.
Well, you anticipated my second question. I'm just wondering if there's been much internal discussion about the governor's categorizing of certain fall sports. Particularly, what was kind of a head-scratcher to me was the designation of soccer as low to moderate, as opposed to football being high risk. I'm sure most people know that, there's a high degree of contact, collisions, and that sort of thing in soccer. I just wondered if that came up at all.
I think your question is a question that many have on their mind, okay, to understand the categorization of the different sports. I look and I'm seeking to understand more, and I've been seeking to understand more. I really don't have an answer for that, of what put those into certain categories. I know that, I don't know, Brett, is there anything that you can say about the categorization of anything that might shed some light? I know that we've had some conversations, but I don't want to misspeak on any of those categorizations.
Not specifically, they came from the governor's office. So whoever his aides and whoever he gets information, he selected those sports. And I can give you more data when you need it, or more comment if you'd like it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think for me, when I think about sports and kids, I think about that camaraderie,
Yep.
working as a team,
Yep.
and the lack of socialization right now that our kids are missing. And obviously, my first concern is safety too. But I'm wondering if it would be all possible now, while the weather is nice and kids could be outside, if the teams be outside doing like training camps and
Right.
practicing, obviously not practicing football where you're running plays and stuff, but training, keeping up with your physical activity, something like that, just to kind of get the kids outside and moving a little bit more, exercising, maintaining their sportsmanship qualities.
Yep.
The teamwork, those kinds of things. I don't know if that's worth it to schools or students to do that and then not have games.
Well, Trustee Morrow, it's an excellent point, and it's absolutely part of the consideration. That's why I'm not willing to say anything about an all or nothing. It's really going to be delineated, and it has to be delineated by sport. Okay. Now, I'm not throwing it off the table that it might be a nothing, because we might be faced with that, right? But we are looking at individual sports that are on the approval list, and everything from practice all the way through. Me as your superintendent, with what I'm truly comfortable after I have all the data in front of me, saying to the community, because I'll be the one that will come out and say that we're going to do this because of this. We're not going to do this because of this. And it may be contradictory to some of the guidance that's out. I can guarantee you this, it won't be on feeling. It will be based on, and we'll continue to base it on data combined with the guidance and our readiness to be able to do that. What we do have on our side, an excellent point, is that the weather is still nice. So outdoor stuff does bring up a whole different horizon that is aside from where we are with education right now. The challenge with education is that we're in a room. The glory of being outside is that sometimes we have endless space. So all of that is being taken into consideration and what that can look like. Because I do agree with you. The objective is to get kids in. It's the objective there. So if we can do that in a phased-in approach that does meet that need and reaches the first objective, then we're not going to be afraid to pull the trigger with it, per se.
And I guess this is a bit of a follow-up to it. On that, the 12 feet guidance for PE versus sports, and I can't remember, I know what that is. Is the 12 feet guidance outside for PE, or is it just inside?
The 12 feet guidance as it related to it, I believe it kept PE as a general, okay? I don't think that, unless Kelly or anybody that has read the guidance as much as we all have, I do not recall if it indicated if it was inside or outside. But the assumption, I believe, was that it was in an inside space. So.
That's, one thought that I,
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, you had mentioned, you sort of alluded to this just now before this, but you mentioned it when you first brought in, the schedule, was that, you'd like the opportunity to allow small groups of kids, students to be able to come into schools. If you're going to utilize your time in the first phase to do that with, UPK, K, and 1, those kids really need to, see a classroom,
Yep, absolutely.
Like, your kids who play sports might be sort of those middle high school kids, it's just me thinking of it, who could be that small group maybe as, safety first, of course,
Yep.
but that's that group where you,
Yep,
you
absolutely.
might be able to see how that works.
Absolutely. And it's, even when you look at some of our middle and high schoolers are the last ones that are really getting that exposure and socialization, all of that comes into play. There's been a lot of conversation also. Do we do it, do we find ways to do it with varsity and possibly JV, and we hold off on modified, okay, to make sure that everything is, I'm just telling you everything that's out there, right? Make sure that things are okay and that things are running okay and that coaches, see, here's one of the things that you also risk. It's the risk that we face in this pandemic. We also have to make sure that we don't become complacent, right? So we start something and then things get comfortable and then we're actually promoting. So we have to make sure that, promoting, not following the guidance because we've become complacent with it. So the procedures that would have to go along with it, it's also going to be training for our staff. Okay, as a coach, how do you do this? What does this look like? Individualized sports, I think, are going to be a little bit easier than, and when I mean individualized, they're still team sports, but an individual being here doing this by themselves without naming any sports by name has a lot different complexities than a sport that has 12 people gathered in one place at any given time, or 10 people or 5 people. Or indoors versus outdoors. And there's just a lot that's going to go into it.
And, I echo what John said about the social emotional for those kids. That's something.
Well, and it's something that we'll have to consider too if we figure this out. So I'll announce this tonight. We're going to look at other ways to bring kids in as well. That may not be the athlete, but that might be able to do something that's outside. Let's just say if we go in that direction, that we're able to social distance more or have other connections deeper than just school. The end goal and getting to the end goal, that has to be the continuous model that we're looking at. But we also have the ability to stop. Now, I'm also not going to lie to you, making sure as a district that we can do it on all fronts. Safety, training, that we can afford to do everything that we're saying that we're going to do, because the education has to come first. We're still facing a budget crisis here in New York State, folks, no matter what. And it's not, you know, that I'm bringing this up when we're talking about sports. I'm just telling you the reality. Right now, we're still seeing, as Rob will attest to, 20% holdbacks in our state aid. Now, it has not been defined that those are going to be permanent, but it is something that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about everything. When we're phasing things in, and it could get much more expensive to phase things in, to make sure that we're doing things appropriately in this build-up approach is going to be important as well. So there's a lot that goes into this.
I just had a, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, actually, I was going to ask, I know that some of this, especially when we're talking about phys ed, that's very much in our own purview to decide what our policies are going to be and how we're going to do that. But when it comes to intramural sports, right, amongst the different schools, obviously, in our case, Section 6 plays a role in deciding what we're going to be doing, but presumably we also play a role. It's not just going to be Section 6 saying this is how we're doing things, right? So presumably we might say, well, Section 6 said that there's not going to be competitions between teams doing this. Is that where their responsibility would end? And we'd say, oh, okay, well, if we're not playing this sport in the winter, we're going to do this instead with this team? Is there, have we already had those discussions in terms of who's going to decide what?
I'll open it up for Brett to comment as well, but let me, I think the best parallel that we could see is exactly what we do at schools. Okay, the governor made an announcement of what we could do up to, right? I'll keep it as we make the decision, but I'm going to also tell you it comes along with being a superintendent, making the difficult decision to sometimes tell people, no, we're not going to do that. So ultimately, the decision is going to rest with us as a district on what we can and what we can't do. And if something is approved to move forward, like there are certain sports right now that are approved that may be approved or recommended for practice, but not competition, okay? That has a whole nother set of issues that come along for kids. And, you know, we're not just looking at, even though how important the social emotional component is for children, there are a lot of scholar athletes that have also a lot on the line for their futures, okay? That I'm not going to say that that plays the only important part of this, but it is something that we have to consider, and what is going to give them the most benefit as well. So it will ultimately boil down to what we decide as a district. Section 6 will make, NISFA will make the guidelines and recommendations. Section 6 will really look at how they're going to proceed as a section, but ultimately the individual districts that are within Section 6. Now, Brett, Section 6 has 90 some schools, okay? The Niagara Frontier League has, I'm getting better at this, right, Brett? Has 9 schools that are participating in it. Niagara Frontier will also make some recommendations on what they can see can happen. We're either in or we're out. And that's what it's going to boil down to. Does that make sense? I know that was kind of general way to answer.
It does, and I just wanted to understand that obviously there is some sort of sense of hierarchy to that, and I just wanted to make sure that I was just making it a correct assumption.
I just want to make it clear, Andrew, I'm not looking at it any differently than the way that I looked at opening schools. It's not, I can't just take the guidance that's out or the okay that's out and say, okay, we can. There's going to be a lot more that goes into that. I don't know what put things on certain lists. I have some questions, just as everybody else does. but we will look at them one at a time, and we will make individualized decisions based on what is approved at this time.
So, for example, the Niagara Frontier League says we're scheduling games for sports A, B, C, and D, and we're like, cool with A, B, and C. D, we just feel like, in our judgment, that's not going to work. We're going to do practices, but we're not going to compete, right? There's those different tiers in there, and we may come to a different conclusion. And like you said, that's a hard choice to make as a superintendent. But that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep, and it will be challenging, and be prepared that we will have, with this decision that will come within the next, hopefully, week, there will be, just like there was with opening of school, there will be probably half the people that completely understand, and half the people, not just for me, but that will hate the superintendent. It comes with the territory of this, but just understand the premise that we'll be operating from, and that we'll be making the decision from.
And it could change in a month too.
And it could change. It could change by tomorrow.
Yep.
There's, without mentioning any schools, there are challenges. There are things that are going very well. I've talked to some colleagues that had a great first day that started in hybrid. And I've talked to some colleagues that had a very, and we've seen, without discussing any and naming any by name, some that have had some extreme challenges. So it really is district specific, and it's going to depend on the level of readiness that I feel where we are as a district.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
My question, very similar to Andrew's, maybe almost the same, really, but, and maybe this is going to be talked about tomorrow, but at some point, will the section look at, will they pull other schools? So let's take soccer, for example, right? And Kenton decides, well, soccer might not be a good idea right now, okay? And maybe 10 other schools do that. At some point, will the section say, wait a minute, maybe we're better off moving soccer to the spring? Because you talk about the social-emotional thing. I lived it last year with my son. You know, he missed the whole baseball season, and it was devastating to him. And I know right now football and volleyball, practice only. If that continues that way, my understanding is that those sports could be moved to the spring. But a sport that is okay to play now, like soccer, if, you know, of those 90 schools, if 70 of them decide to play, those 20 schools, those kids are left out. And I know it's similar to the way we open schools, but in a way it's not, because in athletics, in Section 6, every school impacts the rest of the section, right? Or at least the rest of their leagues.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And, you know, I think at some point, like we did we decided on remote learning when we said at some point it becomes a better educational model to do it remotely. Well, at some point, it might become a better model to say, let's move soccer to the spring, or let's move, because I just would hate for these kids to lose their
And to
total season.
everybody's defense that has been working hard on it, they are looking for feedback. Superintendents will provide feedback tomorrow. There are surveys that will also be completed. So there's still a lot of work to do. It's not just a Kenton thing and figuring out the work right now. I think everybody is in the same boat, is exactly just that mindset and processing through it. And so what does that mean? And what could happen if? And if football is just a skills thing right now and there's zero contact, what happens if? You know, so all these scenarios, that's why it's not just as easy as saying, yeah, we're on or we're off. And everybody will be very clear on their opinions. There are, I'm not going to lie to you, there are some very emotional opinions out there, which you got to understand. Just like you with your son, Matt, and it's the direct impact on kids. No one can take these decisions lightly. So we'll see where it fleshes out tomorrow. We'll see where it fleshes out for the rest of this week. We'll see first, before we make decisions as Kenton, if there are some more grandiose decisions that are made collectively, and then we'll take it from there. That's why I say I would like to make an announcement by Friday. I told the community that I wanted to have something by Friday. Maybe it might be only in part by Friday, and some things are still lingering after Friday, based on the collective work of the group. Because that is a great point that you brought up. It does affect other districts more than what our educational model did. So we'll see. We'll see. But great points. Anything else for the conversation or discussion on that, or anything else you'd like me to seek more input or feedback or clarity on? If you can, and you read through any of the return to interscholastic athletics guidance, any of the work that you see or the recommendation from the governor's office, just be, and I will of course update you on Friday of where we're at, okay? And we'll take it from there. Great work again to our academic team. The only thing that I have left for you under the update today, unless Brett, was there anything else that I forgot that you would like to tail off or finish off with athletics?
I don't know that I can, purpose is not to offer comfort, it's to give you just more information. I just want everyone to know the levels at which this has been. It hasn't just been with New York State Public High School, this task force. So starting last May, the National Federation of High Schools, which oversees state organizations, back to Mr. Janney's question about who's where, there is a National Federation of High Schools. Well, they were on top of their game on in May or June when they sent us reopening protocols back then. Then the task force met, and the task force is made up of superintendents, but also nurses, athletic trainers, SED people, Department of Health people were also on the task force committee. So there's a lot of knowledge and training and expertise going into the document. It's a very difficult situation, obviously. I don't know if you'd like me to cover, and Mr. Schmato referenced the Niagara Frontier. So Saturday we met for about 4 hours also to break down this packet and go over our protocols as well. What's the visiting team's responsibility? Who's going to take the temperatures? So to offer you some understanding and some comfort, those discussions have been going on since May. And that's why I think the governor okayed this proposal, honestly. So we had 3 active groups in our community this year. We had the Kenmore Soccer Association that had 16 teams and a camp of 51 kids. No COVID cases. We had a Legion baseball team and a travel softball team at Kenmore West all summer. Just checked with the coaches today. They're not doctors, but no COVID cases. So it's something to think about. Mr. Schmato's fantastic at including me. We're working as a team, sometimes too many hours. But I'm excited when I come here and Mr. Tagley notes the award ceremony. I look at 2 of my best student athletes in the district. People are working hard. There's so much to this decision, and we'll try and make the best one we can. But it's not fly by night. There's a lot of research involved. That's really good.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett. And to Brett's point, waiting on the research is not also our style. So we look to find the data ourselves and make sure that we're the best informed that we can before a decision is made. That's what I can guarantee you. Can't guarantee you a decision at this time, what it's going to be, but I can guarantee you we're going to work. We're going to work to make the best one we can. Okay, with that, the last thing, and thank you, Mr. Banker. Thanks for all of your hard work as well. You know, Brett and I, Brett's a funny guy, isn't he? Him and I don't always agree, but we always respect each other very much, and we'll share our feelings or our reservations or promote whatever is on the agenda. So I appreciate that about Brett. Thank you very much, Brett. The last thing that I wanted to share with you under the update is that I received a letter recently from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And I brought this up to you, I believe, I believe it was in the update.
In the update, yep.
I'm losing track of days. It's a long weekend, I'm sorry. But this letter that I shared with you talks about this working group, and they sent it to a lot of people in the area, a lot of organizations. We were one of them as a school district, and at least 5 or 6 other organizations that have a vested interest in the community. And basically what this is a self-governing and voluntary body that's chaired by the Kenmore-Tonawanda, supported by the DEC and the New York State Department of Health, sharing information and concerns and recommendations to foster the community's confidence in the remediation process of the Tonawanda Coke site. So these are meetings that I think will be happening regularly. I have to respond to them in a letter of interest. We have to respond to them in a letter of interest. I wanted to bring it to you to see if there was any board members that were interested in representation on this group. The reason why I thought that I should bring it to you is that we all have a vested interest, obviously, in that Tonawanda Coke site. You're working directly with the community and representing community members. So I wanted to offer you the opportunity, since they did send it to me, and bring it up for discussion this evening. So that's the last thing under my update. And President Chimera, I don't know if you want to take that further or how you want to proceed with that.
Well, what do we think? I think it would be a good idea to have a representative there. I'm open to suggestions if anybody would like to do that. If not, I'd be willing to do it, but only if nobody else did.
I would be willing to try it also. My husband is in the environmental field, so kind of
Oh,
like is a daily conversation with our house, so I might be able to bring extra information from
great.
that. So unless you're
No,
fine with me.
no, that would be great. And if there's, a meeting you can't attend, or, I would certainly be your backup.
Yeah, and I think that bringing back some things to the board just as updates from, from the meeting, and keeping our community, made aware of, of what's going on and how things are progressing was really kind of the premise that I thought would be.
Yeah, I think a combination of the fact that that's potentially part of our tax base in terms of what they end up doing with that, as well as there may be opportunities for that space being used for something that would benefit the children of the district as well. So I think that's a great idea, and I think Jen and or Matt would make a great delegate to that.
Sounds great.
So then, President Chimera, Gina and I will work on just responding to them. Just let us know at the end exactly where to go, or if you want to do Board Member Morrow,
I think that-
as an alternate, or both of you together, and then we'll just respond by this Friday.
Yeah,
If you want to do it together, that would be fine with me, or if you wanted to
that's fine. We
try to
can-
figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay, great. 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 Thank you very much. And so, President Chimera, that concludes our update this evening.
I think you have
Oh,
an
I'm
action
sorry.
item too, right?
I'm sorry, next point, I'm sorry. Thank you. I appreciate it. Gina didn't jump on that and correct me.
She didn't kick you?
She can't kick me from that far away. So we do have 2 memorandums of agreement that you will see on the agenda that I'm looking for you to take action on. So President Shamera, the first one is a memorandum of agreement with the KTSEA on transportation bidding date and procedures is an action item, and I'll look for the board to take action on it.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement for the KTSEA transportation bidding date and procedures?
So moved?
So moved by Andrew. Second by Tom. Is there any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you, sir. And also then a recommendation to you, President Shamera, on a memorandum of agreement for the KTSEA transfer rights. It's an action item.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement for the KTSEA transfer rights? So moved by Leslie. Second by Jen. Is there any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. White for an update from Instruction and Student Services.
Thank you. I have a couple of items to share this evening. The first is the summer programs update. So you have a copy of the summer school annual report, which looks a little condensed from previous years, mostly due to the fact that the June Regents exams and the August Regents exams were effectively canceled. So for a lot of the part, our enrollment is driven by students who need to retake or enroll in mini courses in order to prepare for those Regents exams and want to improve their grades. So our enrollment this year was 344 overall, and those were exclusively students recovering course credit, where last year in 2019, our enrollment was 609. But our course enrollment is pretty consistent with the way that it was last year, and the remaining students were really those trying to recover and or retake Regents exams. So that part was great. You can see our total number of graduates this summer. We had 20 students out of 26 graduate, which was excellent and very comparable to previous years. Our attendance took a hit this summer. Last year, even with our enrollment being nearly double, we had only 47 students who were removed from the summer program for violating the attendance policy last year compared to 85 this year. I think that the remote environment really was a challenge for our students this summer, and it was a little more difficult to chase them down and encourage them to continue their attendance. Our overall results were very comparable to previous years. I did inquire because we did have one course with less than desirable results, and there really wasn't any known factor that we could attribute to our global history results being the way that they were. We could potentially say that because that course is heavy in reading and writing, requires a significant amount of student investment, that perhaps the remote environment impact that, but we can't say for certain. We had only 13 8th grade students in this summer. As you know, we did not continue with the middle school or the elementary summer programs this year, or well, 2020. Those 13 students were in completing the Spanish A mini course, which is a high school credit that they need for graduation. So we asked those kids to come in to try to recover that credit. So they had that for graduation. Were there any questions on the high school program report?
I have a question talking about the global results. For the students who did not pass in the summer, what's next for them? Do they have to register for that course for the whole upcoming school year, or can they get some tutoring and prep for the Regents exam?
So it depends on their status prior to this fall. And some students, we would be able to put them into a credit recovery with some academic support and allow them to recover the credit by unit. And we are able to disaggregate the data and identify what units need to be recovered, and other students may need to repeat the course. Mhm. Any other questions? Okay. So the second thing that I have to share with you is a draft of a district code of conduct addendum. So rather than making any adjustments within the code of conduct, I've had some conversations about creating an addendum that is very specific to COVID, and that way if there are any sudden changes during this year, which is possible, we'd be able to just take a look at the addendum and isolate those recommendations. So what you'll see in there are things that are attentive specifically to what is happening with COVID. I do want to give plenty of credit to Larry Scott, who serves on the District Code of Conduct Committee, whom I met with. We've reviewed a number of samples from other districts, discussed how best to move forward, and I will give him credit for the bulk of this work. He's done a fabulous job of continuing to do this research and present some drafts, and we worked on that together. So just to kind of give you a little quick skim over this, we identified the students' rights. Really, the students have the right to be safe and protected. They have the right to proper, safe facilities. Those types of things are in there. The second section is in student responsibilities. So in this version of the addendum, students have the responsibility to dress appropriately. We wanted to acknowledge that the code of conduct and the appropriate dress applies in a remote situation, especially if you're in a video conferencing scenario. We need to make sure that students continue to abide by the code of conduct, and their behavior and conduct also continues to be subject to the code of conduct. We are asking, there's another section related to the acceptable use of information technology. So as you know, we're moving toward one-to-one devices, and many of our devices have been deployed to our students. So this was just a reinforcement that the acceptable use policy continues to exist. There's no expectation for privacy. They must use the district property as district property, even though it's perhaps in their home. The next section is student responsibilities during in-person learning. So in person, we're asking students to wear masks, to be socially distant, to practice hand hygiene, parent expectations. We are asking parents to complete the daily attestation that their children are symptom-free, that their children have not traveled to any of those designated areas of risk. And we are also asking that they prepare the students for the environment that they would be in person by wearing masks. They're continuing to support us and reinforce those requirements. Staff expectations, same thing. Staff will be expected to wear masks, social distance, and practice hand hygiene regularly. Visitors to school is another addendum. They'll be limited to appointment only, and visitors are also required to complete the attestations, to wear masks on the premises, and to abide by social distancing requirements. And this just talks about the procedures of code of conduct violations, in that the code of conduct applies in a remote situation, in a hybrid and in-person model. One of the things that we did add in there is that full remote learning may be an intervention if all other things are exhausted. So if a student is coming to school and is refusing to socially distant and or wearing masks, that may be one of the consequences would be for that student to participate in fully remote learning. And then we updated the behavior flow chart with identifying those behaviors that are managed at the teacher level, those that are minor incidents that the teacher could assign a consequence, and then major incidents that we will handle at the building level. So just a brief kind of overview. Were there questions about the Code of Conduct Addendum?
Is that something that parents are
So we're looking at a variety of ways. Ideally, we'll be offering a menu of options, either in paper, pencil type task for those families who prefer that method, an electronic version for families who prefer that method. But we will be asking our parents to help us to make sure that their children are safe when they send them to school.
So there would have to be something that they'll have to.
Yes, yes.
Yes, it won't be passive. It'll actually be something
Active
they have to
consent.
complete.
Just, so in terms of the code of conduct in general, this is something that has to be adopted on an annual basis. So presumably, this addendum applies until the end of this school year, and then we would do a new code of conduct next year, so this addendum would basically expire at that point unless we chose to go with an addendum approach for the next school year's code of conduct?
True,
Yep, thank you.
true. Yes, and if everything goes away and we're back in utopia in a couple of months, we can just remove the addendum. It no longer applies.
You kind of answered my question already. I was going to just ask if the same, this all applied to both hybrid when people are in person or remotely. I guess my one, I don't know if it's a concern, but, the appropriate dress thing, when they're remote. And, if you look at page 4, it refers to page 14 in the regular code, which I have, and there's some pretty, I don't want to say strict, but pretty detailed things here that might be difficult to control in a remote environment. Just wondering if we're not consistent.
They're difficult to control in an in-person environment.
True.
That will be the expectation. I mean, the teachers have control over a video conferencing session, so if a student is sitting there, wearing less than what is appropriate or something that is, in violation of our code of conduct, we could, in effect, remove their camera privileges and have them participate via microphone only. I mean, can we control it? We can actually control it better in a remote environment in some cases.
True.
Yeah, so, and it's a good point, President Chimera. I guess the message that we were really hoping that families receive with that is that even though kids are not actually coming on site right now, they should still be waking up and going through the same procedures as they would as if it was a normal school day. So the one extreme where, kiddos might wake up, take a laptop and sit in their bed and just kind of log in, that should not be the procedure that they're doing. They should get up, they should have a good breakfast, they should really get going with, I'm ready to work at whatever time first period, because it varies from school to school and age to age, and be ready to sit there and go to town, go to work. So I hear what you're saying about the dress code, because it will be challenging, but we really want children and families to know this is a big difference from the spring. We're not.
No, I agree. I'm glad to see that.
Yeah.
You're saying if they're wearing slippers and we can't see that they're wearing slippers.
It's only half the problem.
More power to them.
Yeah.
That is, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So with that, I respectfully recommend to Superintendent Samato the Code of Conduct Addendum for first read by the Board of Education.
Thank you. And President Chimera, with that, I would recommend that action is taken on that first read for the Code of Conduct.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the Code of Conduct COVID-19 amendments, first read? So moved by Tom.
Second.
Second by Andrew. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Finally, I have a few items on my consensus agenda. Were there any questions on any of those items? No? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That concludes my report.
And thank you, Assistant Superintendent White. And folks, if you have not had the opportunity to really work shoulder to shoulder with Kelly, she is something special. So special congratulations to her and all of her leadership over the past several months, well before my tenure began in Kenton. And she's just a very dedicated individual that really knows her stuff. So really, thank you very much, Assistant Superintendent White, for all of your hard work and dedication. It is above and beyond. With that, we'll move to our financial report from our interim Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Rob McDowell.
Thank you, Superintendent. We had a couple of action items today. The first one is a amendment to the tax rate. Back in August, we had we recommended the tax rate that was approved. The amount was $53.10 per thousand. Subsequent to that, a couple weeks later, we received a letter from the county that said that some of our assessed values had changed, so we had to change the resolution or recommendation. The actual levy has not changed at all. It's just, unfortunately, when the actual amounts go down, taxes goes up. It will cost everyone additional 5 cents, so maybe manage that. With that recommendation, we also have two other certificates that must be sent to the county so that they can pay tax bills, and one of them the actual tax budget, and then the other one is an overall accumulation of what the levy is and what the assessed values are in the actual tax rate. So nothing out of the ordinary, this happens often. They are receiving data every day. That is action item B, and then action item C is our unbalanced reserve fund resolution. This again is a yearly action item that we must bring to the board. It basically is the results of the active fiscal year. We did have a good fiscal year. It's been a trend year for the last couple of years, so kudos to management, the board, and everyone involved to continue to do great things here. So the actual fund balance resolution, like you can see, we have 3 documents, and all of them are showing what the new reserves will have in now, what the historical trend has been, and then more importantly, the actual analysis from last year to this year, so that you can see everything that has occurred. And this is something that we must look forward for, we can't move funds into our reserves without reporting to the system. Those are the 2 action items that we have for the board today. If you have any questions about it? Superintendent Samato, those are my 2 recommendations for action.
Okay. With that, President Shamara, so the first one, the recommendation, I'm recommending to the board for the amended tax rate action item.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the amended tax rate recommendation for 2020 to 2021? So moved by Leslie,
Second.
second by Andrew. Is there any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
And then President Shamara, I'm recommending the resolution on the fund balance and reserve fund.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the fund balance and reserve fund resolution?
So moved.
So moved by Andrew. Second by Jen. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. I have 3 consistent agenda items for buildings and grounds, food service, and transportation. They're not in that order here. We need to really report as food service had another really good year financially, and the role is doing a great job. That's something that I've learned to just expect from her. So
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. McDowell, as you know, actually, Rob, this is your first, you were in a board meeting that was a special board meeting, correct? But this is your first official originally scheduled board meeting. Rob has been assisting on an interim basis. John, as you know, left us, and Rob has been doing a fantastic job, working actually not just here, he works with a couple districts currently. So thank you very much, Rob, for all of your assistance. This has definitely been it's been a fun time, Rob. It really has. So thank you very much. And with that, then I will turn it over to Mr. Richards from Human Resources, our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Superintendent D'Amato. Good evening. I don't have a report tonight. There are items on the consensus agenda. If there's questions, I'll entertain those. I'd like to say that I've been working with a lot of staff members over the last few weeks. We continue to be highly flexible with them. They greatly appreciate it during this first phase of instruction. And I think we're off to a pretty good start, all things considered, quite frankly, especially based on the teachers I've spoken to last week and this week. And we are working with staff as well, support staff. And finally, our hiring is just about wrapped up. We do have one singleton out there that you'll see next month, and then there'll be the usual term. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. And folks, the whole team, Mr. Richards has been, summertime is never easy in HR. So now you put COVID on top of it, and everything that Jeff has been doing, him and Patrick and the entire team in HR. So great job, Jeff. Really excellent job. Outstanding work. With that, then I am offering to you, President Shamera, the consensus agenda.
Okay, are there any requests to withdraw specific items from the consensus? Okay, then do I have a motion to approve the consensus agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Andrew, second by Leslie. Is there any discussion? Okay, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. All right, item 12, any other matters? Okay, and we have no need for another executive session this evening. So do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Tom. Second by Leslie. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.
Are we clear?
You good?
Please check. Good, excellent.
Kendall and Lauren, before you guys leave, can I just see you for a sec?
And then get home and go to bed.
Yes. That's right.
So what did you think, girls? Did you have fun? Was it everything you hoped it would be?
Hey, Gina, these are all the resumes and the, do you want those?
Yeah.
So folks, I hope that made sense about